We're almost getting ready to go here. A few more people coming on.
Wouldn't say people, but
Things.
Yeah, right.
okay.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, well, good morning, in person and online. Before, I got a bunch of stuff I'm going to cover today, but I want to get a feel for how are you seeing the marketplace in the last week? Active, very active, yeah.
Much more than normal.
So one of the things I did to try and really get a handle on the market itself is I set myself up probably about 3 weeks ago on Treb. I just went in, I put myself in as a contact, and I literally just put in Peel, Mississauga, Freehold. And active for listings, conditional price changes and sold. I highly recommend wherever you work, you need to do that. And I get it so that it comes immediately. Talk about having my finger on the pulse of what's going on in the marketplace, and as active as it is. So I'm amazed at how many places I'm seeing coming up that are, good value, like they're priced where they should be. And within 3, 4, 5 days, they're sold conditionally. Right? So price is really important, but it's really important that you set yourself up, because that's what consumers are doing. And I know lots of you will use the Realm or whatever, your websites, to be able to get your consumers connected, but really important that you set yourself up too, if you're not doing that. I do talk about going online daily, and having a look, but I can tell you just by seeing how many instantaneous, how many emails I'm getting about new listing, sold conditionally, a price change, and then sold. The market is definitely active. Okay. And everybody's seeing that. Are you seeing the inquiries? Are you consumers definitely are engaging, and if they're just in the beginning process of engaging, but I'm also seeing really, really realistic listing prices coming out now. So it's like the new listings, the new sellers are being realistic. And part of that may be because, like, the people that bought my listing, they were realistic because they knew what they could get and they were upgrading. And I'm seeing and hearing more people looking to upgrade now versus, we're just going to look, we're going to look. What are you guys seeing? Am I the only one seeing this? Or I see some heads nodding, but love to hear what you're seeing.
I'm seeing some of my buyers are closer to getting out the door. So I've been trying to push a few people because they've been sitting on the fence and I don't want them to miss opportunities. But they've been really holding back, and now they're talking. So that's good. That's good.
Yeah, which is really good.
It is.
Herbert,
really
you're
good.
nodding.
I'm seeing exactly the same thing. Selling prices are getting realistic. It seems the sellers are getting the message. You got to price properly now.
Yeah. And what's good about that is that's a great market to make a ton of money if you're a busy, active agent. And that's the thing, we talk about the consistency, right? And Nasir's sitting here and he's smiling because I think he's done 3 or 4 deals in the last 30 days. So he's been, but
even the buyers are being more aware. So same buyers with Pickering, they looked at so many houses, they waited to see if something better comes out.
Yeah.
And then they lost 1 or 2, actually.
They lost 2, right?
Then when they came back to another one, the decision, I didn't even have to do anything. They wanted it. First, they said, no, we won't go up to 1 million.
Yeah.
So I knew it was a dead deal. And the next morning they said, let's go. We are accepting it.
Good
It was
for
not
you.
till 6 PM that
Yeah.
night. So it was,
And these are all long time clients,
these were
referrals from
Yeah.
longtime
Yeah.
clients. Excellent, well done. So that's what's happening out there. So again, how are you daily and weekly making sure that you are talking and communicating with people is really important. Okay, because we see the market shifting. I talked to, I talked to a couple brokers recently in different areas in Ontario, and they're seeing the same thing. And Elroy, you're saying, and I know Nancy, you've been having some activity as well. So it is, the consumers now are going, okay, this might be the right time. Because there's a lot of things, even in the economy, that seem to be stronger. Okay. And the challenge is that they're looking to say, what is happening next year? And so the buyers, I'm starting to feel, are now saying, you know what, this might be the right time to buy. Because next year, if the interest rates come down a bit further, activity increases, there is, and the economy will be more settled going into next year. All of that talks, and they're talking about even a slight appreciation in value. Right? So the affordability I'm hearing now is right about where the best it might be compared to next year.
It bottomed out.
Right.
Like, it was dropping, but now
Yeah.
I think it's staying.
Yeah. So, and so what's happening with this activity increase, I've been receiving more calls from agents just in regards to clauses they're seeing in some of the offers that they're encountering, what paperwork really, the different paperwork that they're coming across. So I thought today we'd better do a recap. Okay, just making sure, because of the increase in activity, that you're handling everything and you understand sort of the importance of documentation. Okay. So again, the first one, working with the realtor or working with the RECO guide. Okay. Really important that when you look at the RECO guide, you understand it. Okay. Because the biggest challenge is it's great to send it off to somebody, but do you actually read it and go through it and understand it?
Not as much as I should.
Not as much as you should. I think that's going to be a very common comment on this channel right today. Okay. So if you look at it and you basically even look at what's inside the guide, and Michelle's just going to try and bring it up here so everybody can see it, because I'm sure you don't have it in front of you. But if you actually just go to the second page, the consumers are going to go through this, and it really talks about, what's inside. Well, if you look at the highlights, working with the real estate agent, know the risk of representing yourself, signing a contract with a real estate brokerage, understanding the multiple representation, and the biggest one is how to make a complaint. Right? So what's happening is really important that you understand how to explain this, because under the act, you have to explain it. Under the act, it actually says that you will give this to a possible consumer and possible client, and you explain it. Because when they sign the acknowledgement, it actually says, I acknowledge that the realtor provided this for me and explained. Okay. So if you actually flip over to the page 2 of 12, a lot of times I'm getting agents asking me, okay, well, I'm doing my buyer representation agreement. What do I put on Schedule A? And I know we've discussed it before. And the same thing with a listing. What do I put on that Schedule A, which are the services? Well, if you look at page 2 right here, it basically says working with a real estate agent. If you are a seller, an agent can advise you on market conditions and the best strategies, market or advertise your home, provide referrals. That is really all you need to put on Schedule A.
Yeah, I've copied and
Right?
pasted.
Yeah,
most of them.
like-
And sometimes I've edited if I needed to for
Yeah.
specific reasons or added more. things.
And if there are some things here that you do or that you don't do, you can eliminate them and you could add in stuff. But on that Schedule A for both the listing and for the buyer rep, and if you look at the other side, it says if you are a buyer, an agent can. That's what you need to put down. That's it. Okay, and then listen, also, if there is other stuff that you do in addition to, add that in. Okay? So,
I would-
so that's big.
Sorry to interrupt, but I include, especially when it comes to photographs and things like that, including that it would be I would pay for it and that the use of it remains with me so that they can't reuse your photos if something
Good
happens.
point, very good point. And see, one of the things I do with, depending on the listing I'm taking, is I pay for and do a full home inspection before I list.
Mhm.
So that's one of my additional things that I do for when I take a listing. So I would add that into my seller side. Okay, so if there is something else that you do, then, add that service in there. But if you have no idea, look at that spot because that's what the consumers are looking for, and this is compliant, okay? So if the consumers are getting this information, do you not think maybe you should be able to explain it and say, yep, I do this, I do this, I do that, this, and be able to explain why? Like, for instance, it says, advise you on the best approach in competing offer situations and how to protect your offer information on the buyer side. It's great to say that, but can you talk to it? Can you explain that? Okay, if you can't, you need to be able to. So really look at this, okay? And then you'll also see at the bottom here, it'll say you will also benefit from the duties the brokerage and agent owe to you as a client, okay? Sometimes I'm getting questions from agents saying, well, my client's asking me what I can and can't say to them or what I can and can't share with them. It's right here, okay? So make sure that you follow this. It's really important that you understand your role, okay? That's where a lot of the complaints to RECO are coming from, is where the realtor hasn't explained the role of the realtor relationship with the consumer. Okay, yep, Julia?
So when I would get them to e-sign this, I use Authentisign. There's an email that goes out and I double down on the explanations side of this form. Would that be considered go through explaining the form, or you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, if you are sending the form and then you are actually putting in your own words in a different document, explaining all of that, then that is an explanation. Doesn't have to be verbal. It just has to be explained as long as you put at the end of that document, if you have any questions, please respond before acknowledging receipt.
I often start it too if we've had a verbal conversation about the form, and then I send the list of my explanation points. I do that, but I also say further to our conversation on, and that way I always have a trail of contact about the fact that we spoke about it. Then I sent more comments and with the signing authority, and then that's kept in your records. It's one of the reasons I haven't gotten rid of Authentisign, because all of that stuff is in there.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well done. And that's
It's a good practice.
Yeah, okay. Because again, as activity picks up, Okay, as transactions are being are going through, I'm going to tell you, RECO complaints are going to increase. Okay? Because there will be consumers that miss out on a deal and they're gonna go, how did I miss out? Why, like my agent didn't explain to me that I could possibly be in multiple offers. Yet if you've gone through this and explained it properly, this will help protect you. As long as you can do like Julia does, or have a reference where you explained it by, as per our conversation, or as per the attached documentation, over and above, stuff that, explained, that's what you need. But really more so, you need to know this because this is what the consumers are getting. Keep in mind, okay, consumers are getting this before they sign a relationship agreement. So now imagine you going on a listing appointment and you're not the only agent going there. If the other agent has done their due diligence, they've already explained this to the consumer. Now, if you go in and all you do is drop this off or say, yeah, this is just the guide, I need you to acknowledge it, and you don't explain it, who is going to be, in the eyes of the consumer, the more professional realtor? Right? So think about that, because lots of times consumers are getting, on the listing side, they are getting different realtors in. This needs to be in your presentation. Okay? Be able to handle this properly, be able to explain it. The other side is, think about buyers. How many buyers go around and they either go into open houses or they're not really signed up with an agent. Okay. Are you able to explain this to them? Are you able to even ask the question when they come through and just at your open houses, just say, just want to make sure that you've received, did you ever receive the RECO guide? And some of them are going to go, I have no idea what you're talking about. Great. Have extra copies and just say, hey, one of the things I do to protect my clients is make sure that they understand the process of buying, selling, and working with a realtor. As a giveaway here, take this. Very important for you to read it. It basically tells you what your rights are. And that's with any realtor you want to deal with. I just provide this as part of my services. Because if they've been to a bunch of other open houses and the agents aren't doing that, and they're just sort of opening the door, letting them walk through, who is going to be perceived as the professional? All right. And so if you actually just go through the next page, it just talks about you have responsibilities as a client. Okay. Really important to explain that, you know what, when we do buy and sell or represent clients, it's a relationship. We're both working together. You as the client, me as the representative. So let's make sure that we understand the roles of each other so we can help get you the best opportunity. I don't think there's a client out there that's going to say, no, I really don't want that. Absolutely they do. So real easy. It just says, you have the responsibilities as a client. So you can go through and just understand, and you can explain this, right? And just chat about it. Okay. And then where it talks about know the risk of representing yourself. Okay. Just understand, explain that to them. And you need to understand, if you are confronted with somebody that says, I'm self-represented, two things to understand. More than likely, it's going to happen on somebody calling you to see your listing or somebody coming through an open house. 99% of the time, the reason that they're using that terminology is because their agent told them, look, if you want to go look at properties, just tell them you're self-represented. And when you find the one you want to buy, then we'll go look at it together and I'll do the offer. Majority of the time, that's what it is. I have not seen anywhere RECO advertising, hey, consumers, make sure you understand how to be self-represented, right? So make sure you understand this, okay? Make sure everybody understand what happens if somebody says, I'm self-represented. Anybody had that happen and can answer the question? No? Okay. If you have somebody that says, I'm self-represented, understand, okay? All you have to do is explain to them and say, you're self-represented, that's fine. If it's your listing, okay? You have the option where explain to your seller, when you're doing a listing, you should explain to your seller, there is the option for a consumer to represent themselves. So understand when a consumer represents themselves and are not using a realtor. We don't know who they are. We have no idea about their background. We have no understanding of their situation. They're not cleared by a realtor who does FinTrack. Is that somebody that you want to have coming through your house or possibly looking at being involved in a transaction? And if your seller turns around and says, no way, then when you get that call, right? When you get that call, it says, I'm self-represented, but can you show me the property? You can say, actually, unfortunately, I have a direction, and make sure you have the direction from your seller that says, no self-represent people. Okay. And you have the right then to turn around and go, I'm sorry, I have instructions from the seller that unless the people are represented by an agent, there's no showing.
That's a very good idea.
Right? Okay, yeah, Nat?
I'm assuming that that would be something that you'd put in the seller direction, the 244.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. But explain to the seller, the other thing you can explain to the seller is, now, if you want because you are my client, okay, if you do want me to show a self-represented party the property, I cannot share any information with them. All I can do is literally open the door, give them a copy of the public information on the listing. That's it. How helpful do you think that would be to help sell your house? Really not, right? Now, if that person comes through an open house, it's a different situation because it's open to the public. Okay? You cannot, if you're open to the public and it's a public open house, if somebody comes in and says they're self-represented, all you need to do is open the door, give them a feature sheet, and that's it. They start asking questions about values in the neighborhood, you cannot answer anything. You can say, I'm sorry, but you've stated you're self-represented, and unfortunately, self-represented means exactly that. I cannot share any information except what is public information, which is on the feature sheet. You cannot, yeah.
You can keep going, but to Nazir's point of, you don't know who they are, they have no ID. As of today, October 1st, 2025, if you are in a transaction with a self-represented party, you must ID them as part of your file.
Even if they're self-represented.
Correct.
Yes, that is if they are in the transaction.
Correct. If they are in the transaction.
So prior to showing, you can still show it if you want to. I mean, if the seller.
Yeah, exactly as
Okay.
Scott is saying.
But if it goes
but
any further,
Exactly.
to get their ID.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So again, back to know the risk of representing yourself, also be able to handle those questions, okay? And explain why. And the easiest one is, you basically can say, have you, if you're self-represented, then have you received the RECO guide? Is, where are you getting the terminology self-represented from? And if because here's what's happened sometimes is You know, I think Herbert had this. He said, no, I'm not, you know, I'm not going out to show it. You're self-represented. Within minutes, an agent booked in the showing to show it. Right? So and that's what unfortunately some of the agents are doing. So on the guide, make sure you understand that, okay, what you can and can't do.
There's one more question.
Yep.
If the person is self-represented.
Yep.
The RECO information guide is invalid, like we don't have to send it to them, basically,
Well, if they're stating that they're self-represented,
nothing to do with me, right?
no,
No other documents to show that they signed themselves, like they're saying in writing, no,
correct.
it's just verbal.
Yeah, you're basically, all you're doing is, right, so it just talks about the real estate agent is working for another property, so another party, right? So it's important to understand what they can and can't do, okay? So the idea is that they originally had, excuse me, they originally had, when they first came out, if someone said they were self-represented, you had to send all these forms over to them, right, explaining and that. They got rid of those forms.
So right now verbally, they could tell you that, and later on, they could turn around and say, I never told you that. There should be something, even a one pager saying, I am self-represented and sign off on it.
No, because if they're signing something,
But they're saying, they're confirming they're self-represented to not, to me,
yeah,
just in case.
then,
Oh,
yeah,
nothing.
nothing. Yeah, if they're saying they're self-represented, you can't, like, there are, in the event though that they do want to proceed with an offer, understand you can't write up the offer,
Yeah, so that's the other thing.
okay? The only thing you can do is, and this is where you have to be careful, is the forms we use are strictly for realtors, members of CREA, REA, and the board, okay? If you are representing the seller and there is a situation where a self-represented person wants to do an offer, on behalf of your seller, you can prepare the offer with only the information that's public. Name, address, okay? The possible, you know, whatever legal description. You cannot put a deposit, you can't put a price, you can't put a closing date, you can't put an irrevocable, you can't put clauses in. Because once you start doing that, then you're representing another party. Okay, now, if that other party then decides to submit an offer and they send it from their lawyer or they do one up themselves, then you have all the right to change it and do whatever you want with it. And then that's when you would prepare the offer on behalf of your seller as a sign back and say, here's how the seller will accept an offer and give it back to them. And that's it. Can't explain why, can't tell them any advice. The easiest way to do that is, what does a seller want? You want a cash firm deal. So if you're representing the seller and you're doing an offer, you want cash firm deal, no conditions, because not representing, right? It is very, very rarely going to happen. Majority of the time you hear those words self-represented is because they've been instructed by a realtor to use that term. Okay, so all I'm saying is on the actual document, the guide, make sure you understand that. Make sure you understand if you do come across it, that's fine. Also understand a self-represented person has the right to change their mind. They may start out as self-represented and then they can all of a sudden go, you know what? I don't want to do this on my own anymore. I want the guidance of a realtor. Herbert?
Is it possible that a self-represented person says, well, I'm going to be using a real estate lawyer to handle the paperwork? Is that okay?
That's fine, but they're still self-represented. Okay. And I actually had that situation where somebody called me and said, we're self-represented because my brother's a lawyer and he's going to prepare the offer on any property that we see. And I said, that's fine, but do understand under self-represented, I can't share any information, and really, I don't even need to show you the house. Well, yes, you do. No, I don't actually. My seller tells me they don't want self-represented people in. You'll have to wait. There's an open house on the weekend. Well, we can't get there on the weekend. We'd like to go before. Then maybe you call your brother and see if he could give you some guidance, because I can't. Okay, Nancy, you had a question?
It wasn't really a question as much as it was a comment. I think like this whole situation bleeds down to up here anyway. People coming up and saying that they might be self-represented, but it's in the listing that if I show the house, like show the property, I'm taking a point off, because I find that there's some shady agents out there that are sending people saying that, but they're not self-represented. They're represented by a realtor that didn't get off their butt to come up and do it.
Exactly. And that's happening not only in your area, it's happening everywhere. Okay, yeah, but that's exactly, and that's why I say 99% of the time when someone says that, they've been guided to say that. It's not like it's on a billboard or on the main, you go onto RECO, it doesn't say big bold letters, here's how to be self-represented and why. Right, so just understand as a realtor what you can and can't do, because it's in there, right? Now, signing next one's page 6 of 12, signing a contract with a real estate brokerage, okay? And it goes through, it says what to look for in a representation agreement, okay? Understand, okay, for everybody, we are a designated representative company, okay? And that really talks about the reason we do that is so that if my listing, if anybody else brings an offer in from our company on my listing, it's not multiple representation. Okay, everybody understand that? So when you fill in your forms, make sure you understand and explain that it is the designated representative form you're using. And the biggest example is the listing agreement. Okay, I believe the listing agreement, main agreement's 200. I think the designated representation agreement's 271.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so that's what you need to be able to explain. And the reason you need to be able to explain and why this is in here for the consumers is one of the biggest things that RECO gets, or I as a broker owner get, or a manager of any brokerage gets, is my agent didn't explain to me what I was signing when I signed up the agreement. I want to cancel it. I want to get out of it. So you have to make sure that you, again, go through that listing agreement or that buyer representation agreement and explain it to them, okay? Because it really talks about in here, okay, what the consumer should be looking for. So make sure that you can explain this. One thing about the agreements, okay, and I'm going to go into the agreements shortly, so let's just continue on, but a lot of things that happen on complaints from buyer rep agreements, seller rep agreements, is the fact of it's longer than what the people agreed to. They didn't explain it to me when I signed the offer. They must have just slid it in between the pages. Okay, get into the practice of making sure that you're doing your agreements, especially if it's a buyer rep agreement. Okay, you should get in the practice that you're doing that way before the offer process. Okay, and I'm going to explain that further. So on the guide, look for the other thing when it comes to a listing agreement. If you are having any special things you're doing, such as, if I sell it myself, I'll adjust the fee, or make sure that's explained in writing on Schedule A. Okay. Anything that you're doing that is something that, for instance, sometimes I'll get the call where the consumer will say, well, your agent said that if I could cancel the listing at any time. Guess what? Unless you put that in writing, okay? And they can prove, or if they've got a text from you, or if you guys verbally said that, then they have the right to ask for that termination. Our agreements, the way they are written, okay, our Schedule A that, you know, we talk about, does not give the consumer a termination unless you are doing that. Okay,
If you found that you didn't do your job properly, if
well,
you're not returning their calls for any reason, then they have a right.
well, there are very few exceptions for terminating the agreement. But if you are one of the people that says you have a service agreement that states if they're not happy at any time, they can cancel the listing, you better have that in writing, because I don't want to get, you know, you're just verbally doing that. That unfortunately, any of that type of agreements, they need to be in writing. I don't do early terminations on any of my service agreements. Okay, I personally don't. So, but if you do have that, make sure it's in there. Okay. Expiry dates, make sure it has to have an expiry date. If you are using the holdover clause, understand holdover periods are not mandatory. It could be 0. Holdover days, does everybody understand how that works? If you don't, speak up and I'll explain.
You explain it.
Okay, so a holdover period is where you have an agreement, okay? And the agreement says that if this person, you are introducing them to properties, if this person goes back, easiest one to explain would be a listing agreement. Let's say you have a listing agreement and you have the commission at 5%. The party, after the fact, it expires, okay? But during the time you had that agreement in place, a buyer came through the property. And then the buyer makes a deal after it's expired within mine are 60 days. Within that 60 days after that listing expired, that's the holdover period, those next 60 days. The buyer goes back and they do a private deal. Okay. Because they were introduced during the period of time of the contract, and there's ways that you can prove that. If you can prove that, then you have the right within that period of time after that 60 days to sue for commissions. You have the right that's in the agreement.
Who are you suing?
The seller. Okay. What happens, and this is part of a holdover clause that you also need to understand. So let's say that buyer came through and they did an offer, and the offer didn't go together during the period of time that I have the contract. My listing expires. The seller lists with somebody else, but they only list at 3%. I've listed it at 5%. They listed at 3%, and that same buyer comes back and buys the property within that 60-day period. I can sue for the 2%.
Do the terms of the offer have to be the exact same, or it could be totally different?
Nope, that could be just the fact that that buyer was introduced under the terms of my agreement. And the reason I'm using that as an example, because what happens sometimes is after it expires, the buyer agent goes knocking on the door and says, hey, my people are still interested. I know we couldn't put the deal together, but you know, I'll reduce my commission to make the deal happen. And if it's within that 60-day period and you can prove it, you can sue for the difference in commission.
And how would you know that it was at 3%?
Well,
That's between them, right? If you're suing them, you would have to get RECO involved too. The brokerage involved, the other brokerage to send you a copy.
Yeah, it's amazing sometimes how all of a sudden you're driving by. I've had this case. The listing agent drove by and said, you know what? That's the same vehicle, the people that had the offer on it before, and ironically, it's the same agent that listed it. And then, and he talked to the buyer, and the buyer says, you know, how'd you end up making this deal happen? Well, our agent just came in and was able to get a lower commission, so we were able to buy it. Bingo, you got a claim. Yeah, Ned?
I'm actually like involved with that right now. My listing over on Roberts, my listing on the other side of town,
Yeah.
expired. I did have an offer on it, and the agent that brought the offer approached me and said, will your client still entertain an offer? And I've got them on a 90-day holdover.
Yeah.
But because I thought, this is really bad. This is like a rookie thing to say. I thought that if he were to swoop in and do like an exclusive listing, that I couldn't sue for commission.
You can sue for the difference. If he goes in and does it for exactly the same fee that your listing commission was, you can't sue for anything. You have the right to sue for the difference, if there is a difference. Yep, Julia?
What if it was done off MLS? Because I did have that happen to me. I was representing a buyer, and they waited after the holdover, and then they went directly to the agent and bought it after the holdover, I think, because you can't tell if it's not on MLS. I just noticed, I looked up the property on Land Transfer, and I saw my buyers who I did an offer for bought it like months later.
If you can find that the transaction took place during your holdover period, doesn't matter when the closing date is.
I have no way of, how would I find that out?
You could certainly request that information from you said there was another agent involved on the buying side or the selling?
There was a listing agent. I showed the property 3 times. I brought in trades, the whole bit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then they went on vacation, and the property went off the market. And then I saw months later that it was sold to my buyer, but it was never listed on MLS. So she obviously went straight to the seller's agent, I assume.
Seller's agent.
I assume they did because that seller didn't speak English very well, and I think they were, you know, possibly in a home or something. I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
Did you ask the listing agent by chance?
No, it was after the holdover, so it was last year.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because you have 90 days after the fact.
I didn't discover it until after my holdover was well done. So
right. But once you discover that there's been something that's happened, we have 90 days.
Oh, I see.
Okay. First contact in a situation like that is the broker of record of the listing company.
She was a broker, but
Okay.
and
Yeah,
my clients actually said no, they weren't. I was following up with them, and she responded that she was going to wait and wanted to stop looking, which is fine. And I did three transactions with these people, so it was.
Yeah. So your buyer representation agreement had expired, and the holdover period in the buyer representation agreement had expired.
Yeah.
Okay.
And who knows when the communication started, because it was done off MLS. I only noticed it in Land Transfer.
Okay. Yeah, if you're ever in that situation, it doesn't have to be MLS. It's just your buyer representation agreement. If you've done it correctly, will specify what you can and can't what you are entitled to,
Mhm.
what area, what commission, and I'm gonna go through buyer representation agreement shortly, just to make sure everybody understands the importance of it. I have sued buyers under buyer rep agreements, and won. So I'll explain the real importance of it. Okay, Nancy, yep, sorry. Didn't see your hand
Yeah,
up.
so that was a bit of a shock to me that the statute of limitation is 90 days. Like after.
Yeah, well, if you're gonna take it through the board, right? Your first action is once you discover that there's a possibility that someone has interfered with your agreement, then that would be the first claim. So for instance, under Julia's situation, if we knew that was a possibility, we would submit a claim under the board. And the claim would state that we have enough evidence to determine the possibility that a brokerage has interfered with our existing agreement, our representation agreement. Okay, so under there, we would explain, because especially in that situation, Julie, did you have an offer on that property? You're on mute.
Yes, we did offer on it, and it was priced a bit high, and I could not get them to shake on the price. And then
Okay,
they
so
went down to the States for a couple months, snowbird stuff.
Yeah.
And during that gap, I think is when they probably reached out, because I was like, they weren't looking because they were away.
Yeah. So under that situation, the reason I say it's 90 days, once we know that, then we submit to a claim through arbitration at the board level and stipulate, this is why we're complaining. And then the board would look at it and go, okay, and under that situation, which is why I asked if you had the offer, the listing company would already be privy to the names of your clients. Right? So it's not like they weren't aware. It was absolutely, here's the offer that we submitted. Here's when it got submitted. Here's what happened with the offer. Here's the closing date that showed up on, land registry.
Yeah. We
Here's
went in. We went in at 675, and it got signed back at and the seller signed it back at 725, and then it died.
Yeah. So, but in that
My client
circumstance,
went in way too low, but
yeah, but in that circumstance, the reason, and to answer your question, Nancy, is yes, the boards, if you're using the board, then there are certain days that we have to put a submission in within a certain period of time. If you're suing directly under the courts, you have 2 years. Okay, so really important to understand, back to the guide, and this is why the guide is so important for everybody to understand, because it even talks about the holdover clause in here, right? So that's where we get. Understanding multiple representation. It talks about a brokerage representation and designated representation. We are a designated representation company. The only way you are going to be in multiple representation is if you have a listing and you are representing the buyer. Okay? That's it. There is one other way, which is rarely happens, is if you happen to have 2 buyers that you're representing, okay, on the same property, then you are in multiple representation and both your buyers have to agree to it. Very rarely happens on that one, okay? But multiple representation at the designated structure is only if it's you or whoever else is on your listing. Like I put Michelle on my listing. right? So Michelle and I, if either one of us represents the buyer, it's designated it's multiple representation. Okay? So important to understand that, be able to explain it. If prior to designated representation, that's why you see the brokerage representation is, if I had a listing, I have a listing and you guys bring, anybody in our brokerage brings an offer, it's automatically multiple representation. And that's why I decided as the broker of record that designated representation is how we have operated our brokerage.
And for anyone that is joining us from Frank's office, please check with Frank as to what your brokerage representation is, whether it's brokerage or designated.
If you're with a, if you're with a different Realty Executives brokerage, then you just got to check with what your broker of record has decided. Okay. And it really determines on which agreements that you're actually using. Okay. Any questions on multiple representation before I move on? It's pretty self-explanatory. Be able to explain it. Okay. I've done it last year with no issues because I used all the forms, explained it all, and both parties were okay with it. Okay. The one thing to understand is, yes, the client can refuse to be involved in multiple representation. You just have to be able to let them know what their options are. Okay. And just a note about content of other offers. Okay. This is where they're talking about where there's multiple offers, and that the seller does have the right to share the information and what are the rights of a buyer. Okay, just make sure you understand that. And then obviously how do they make a complaint? And then the acknowledgement is on the back, right? And you can see right in the middle, it says, I acknowledge the real estate agent named above provided the RECO information guide to me and explained the content. Right there. That's the important part. Okay. All right. And that's why the RECO guide is, as I say, activities happening. Make sure you can explain that. Now, one of the other agreements that we're getting some challenge with, and I need you to understand, is a listing agreement. Okay, pretty self-explanatory. You're going in, you're listing it, and then it's a matter of, okay, how much are we listing for? If it sells, this is the commission. Here's how the commission gets paid out. Here's the duties that I'm doing. And you go through all of that. Okay. The only questions I get on an actual listing calls I get is, well, the agent said if I didn't like their services, then I could cancel the listing at any time. Okay. If you're offering that up, as I said before, make sure it's in writing. The other one I get for the listing questions is from sellers is the fact that, well, they said they would reduce the commission. I don't understand. The commission's way too high. That's not what I agreed to. Well, it's in writing. Make sure you explain it. Okay. The one that is really important to understand is, and what you have to understand now is, for you to say you represent somebody, okay, you need to have something in writing. There is a fine line between what they call implied representation. Okay, so I brought this bulletin up, and this is important to understand under representation agreements. Okay, so the representation agreements with clients to provide services and representation must clearly, comprehensively, and prominently set out the required content. So when you look at this, it gives you what the required content is. Okay, and the bottom one says any terms related to termination, including rights and obligations. So if you're a listing agreement, and you're gonna have some special terms in there. Understand in the standard representation agreement, there is no termination. It has an effective date, it has an expiry date. That is the contract. And then your services are on Schedule A. If you are going to have an early termination, you need to specify under what circumstance. I do not recommend it, but if you are going to do that, you need to specify that in either your seller representation agreement or your buyer representation agreement. Okay? And the representation agreement can be in writing or implied. And I'm highly recommending that if you go to the next page, and this is where agents can get caught up, where it says implied agreements, okay? A representation agreement includes an implied agreement between a brokerage and a person. This means that providing services or representation to a person in the absence of a written agreement will give rise to a representation agreement. Agents must be cautious in discussions and in any efforts to help someone who is not their client. The risk is in exercising discretion and judgment, giving advice, offering opinions, or advocating on behalf of the person in an attempt to be helpful. There are a couple exceptions to that, okay? But the biggest challenge that we're seeing, and more so in the States now, this is what, in the States, they are not showing anybody a house unless they've got a buyer representation agreement. Because in the States, majority of the listings now do not have compensation offered to the cooperating broker. So the only way the buyer agent is getting paid is through the buyer representation agreement, which is a big turnaround for them because, like you guys know, I've been involved with the States 25 years now, and I'm amazed that buyer representation agreements to them is all new. We've had them for over 25 years. Yeah, we had them too, but we never used them. Well, I caught up with them and bitten them in the backside. So here's what you have to understand. When you have a written agreement, a listing agreement, okay? And let's say you sell the house and the seller doesn't pay us. What do I sue them? What do I sue under? What documents do I sue with? What's the answer?
The listing agreement.
It's the listing agreement, not the offer. The offer is a supportive document showing that the transaction was done, closed, and if they don't pay us, I have to sue based on the listing agreement. So you have to make sure that your listing agreements are correct. Okay? So now under a buyer representation agreement, if you are out and you're dealing with clients, and I'm going to call them a client because they've signed a buyer representation agreement. Okay? Because until they sign an agreement, you have nothing that you can go back on. So with a buyer representation agreement, the biggest challenge that where agents can mess up is under commission. I've seen, when we've talked about this many times, is agents are putting down as per MLS. Mm-hmm. If we have to sue under a buyer representation agreement and it says as per MLS, you've lost. Not even worth going to court. It needs to be a specified amount. So if it's 2.5%, 2%, 3%, could be a flat fee. Whatever that is, you have to make sure it's explained to them. Okay? You have to explain to them that it counts for everything. They buy private, they buy from a builder, they buy from another agent. As long as as long as our buyer representation agreement is valid, you have to explain to them that they are liable for the terms of that agreement. Okay? You can, and that's why it says implied agreements. You can, and this is where sometimes is if, and some agents, and I get it, and I've done it too, where, you know, you've got a long-standing relationship with somebody and they're going, hey, you know, or you get a referral and it's like, hey, my son's looking at buying something. Can you take him out? You know, here's what he's looking for. You sit down with them and you go, okay, no problem. You know what? You obviously, let's go through the guide. You want to be self-represented or do you want the guidance of a realtor? No, I want you to help me. Want you to help me. Okay. I understand that if I run around and start showing houses to this person, and yeah, we may be looking at a bunch of stuff and I'm communicating with the parents and everybody's all jolly and everybody's happy. And then all of a sudden that person, the son goes out and says, hey, a friend of mine, we were out and I was out visiting him and there was an open house around the corner. I walked in and the agent asked me if I was working with an agent and I did say, yeah. And then the agent then said, have you signed anything? And I said, no. Then the agent said, great. If you work with me on this particular house, I can give you a better deal. And they ended up buying, that particular property. Do I have any claim? The answer is no. Right?
The implied doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. And so the implied agreement, so when you start giving guidance, you start giving your opinion, you start helping that person through a mortgage broker and get financing, you are absolutely, in their eyes, representing them. And in RECO's eyes, you're representing them. You better have something in writing. Okay? So I highly recommend that you get really, really good at being able to understand and explain right after you do the RECO guide. If you're working with buyers, I don't care if they're long lost friends, family, whatever it is, get a buyer representation agreement signed. Make sure it's filled in properly, because if you don't, unfortunately, if they happen just to go out and buy something new, private, through another realtor, you have nothing that you can claim. Yeah, Nance?
Moral of the story is don't trust anybody.
Nobody.
Right? So it's, the fact is that do the proper paperwork. One, it really is a good habit to get into, okay? It also shows that you're very professional, right? You're going through the proper documentation. You're going through and saying, okay, for us to work together, for me to be able to say that I'm booking an appointment and I'm calling up agents and I'm representing you, I technically can't do that without this agreement. Okay, so really, really important. I know it can be a little bit hard if someone turns around and goes, well, I know I really don't want to sign that. I know agents that will go out with somebody one time and basically say, you know what, let's go out. I have no problem taking you out one time, but do understand that for this one property, I need the documentation for this particular property. And then if we decide we want to work together on it, then there'll be a different agreement. Okay,
Signage is a 24-hour one,
Yeah.
even for that property.
for that property.
Well, and can't you put in the buyer rep under like what properties to look for? You can just
Yeah.
put the address,
The
right?
address,
So
you could
it's
just
for that one.
put the individual address, okay? But then, and so what happens is you are then protected and you have the right to say that you are representing them. Because if you're going around and say, oh no, they're my client, technically they are not your client. And under RECO, they're now looking for written agreements, written representation agreements. But the biggest challenge is trying to enforce the agreement, because if we don't have one, you don't have any. I can't even, as the broker of record, I can't even go to the, the agent that did end up getting the deal and say, hey, you interfered with my valid agreement, because you don't have one. Okay, so, and the other thing too is absolutely, like, understand that as close as what your friends, clients, associates, whatever they are, may be, don't let your guard down. I've lost a few listings because I went in thinking these were long-time clients of mine. I've worked with them a couple times, went in casually just talking about, listing their property, didn't go in prepared. And by the end of the weekend, all of a sudden they listed with somebody else. And the answer you get back is, well, we just felt, our relationship's really close, and we just thought we would decide to go with somebody else just so it's a business agreement. That's all BS. So it's just be prepared, and make sure that you're doing the paperwork properly, because there's lots at risk here, right? Okay, so make sure you go through this, that this is a good one. This RECO bulletin is a really good one, because it really does talk about, implied agreements, effective dates, expiry dates, how the remuneration is, okay? And really it really is a good way for you to understand how to proceed with representation agreements, okay? After reviewing this document, if you have any questions, reach out to me directly, okay? And if anybody doesn't believe that they are worth the paper they're written on, I want a $70,000 commission, because the paperwork was filled in properly and we were able to enforce it. Okay, so got a few more documents that I want to cover off, just so everybody understands them. They're not as in-depth as the first two. How are we doing for time? Everybody okay for a few more minutes? I know we're over the hour. Okay. And again, the reason I'm bringing these up is because activity has increased, and I'm getting, different agents asking different questions, and more real pressure, because you probably haven't used them for a while. Okay. Waiver. Okay, this is for an agreement of purchase and sale that has conditions in it. Okay, understand there are two ways that you can deal with conditions in an accepted agreement. There's actually three, but the two would be Form 123 and Form 124. One is a waiver, and one is actually the notice of fulfillment. Okay. Anybody here want to explain the difference?
But they mean the same thing, but just there must be something.
They do not mean the same thing.
Okay.
But that's why I'm here.
Let's go.
All right. Okay.
Okay, so a waiver is when there are conditions in the agreement and the parties agree to waive the condition to remove them from the offer, that they no longer need to be fulfilled. So for example, an inspection, if there's a condition in the agreement that it's conditional on inspection, and then the buyers say, you know what, I just want the house, I don't care about the inspection, they can submit a waiver to waive that clause or that condition.
Okay.
A notice of fulfillment of conditions means that condition was fulfilled. So for example, with the inspection, if the buyers are still strong on this offer is conditional on inspection, the inspection happens, there's no issues with it, and they want to proceed, they have to submit a notice of fulfillment unless the condition says otherwise.
But they can still do a waiver after the condition, after they inspect the house.
Okay, so
They do that. all the time.
as the listing agent,
Mm.
I'd rather have the notice of fulfillment, okay? Because, and I'm glad to see the thousands and thousands of dollars I spent to send her to Queen's Law. came into good use, because you're absolutely right.
Guys, if I know anything, it's how to protect somebody legally.
So.
Not really fair. Her
abs-
last name is Gilmore as well, so I don't know. She was born into this. I'm sure she knew about waivers at age 1, but you know.
But that's absolutely right. The waiver is, what they're doing is they're waiving their rights to something. Okay? They had the right to have an inspection. They waived that right. A notice of fulfillment means they proceeded with their rights, and they're now saying our rights have been fulfilled, we're proceeding. So if somebody has actually done a home inspection, you really would prefer to have a notice of fulfillment, because they can't come back to you and say, well, we didn't get the opportunity to do it, but you actually can go, here's the notice of fulfillment. It shows that you fulfilled your obligation. And the biggest one is for financing. So if someone's got a condition on financing, you want a notice of fulfillment, because that says that they fulfilled their obligation of getting financing. Where if they waive that financing clause out of the offer, you can't come back and say to them, well, they turn around and they go, well, we can't close because we didn't get financing. And what's going to happen is you can still sue because they waived their right. But if you have a notice of fulfillment, that's even stronger to show that they proceeded with their rights. They had the right to do something, they fulfilled their right, and now they're letting you know that right of ours has been fulfilled. Okay? Any questions on those two?
But because you don't have a control on what the buyer agent will do on your listing, if you get a waiver, you'll still accept it, right?
You absolutely have control.
Or you can tell him I
Yeah,
want to fulfill.
Just say, you know, if you're doing, you know, you have conditions in the offer, please understand, once they complete their obligation of their conditions, please send us a notice of fulfillment, not a waiver.
Yeah, you don't have to accept anything.
Oh,
Again, a waiver you absolutely can take, but as the listing agent, like, you would rather have the notice of fulfillment.
And also, like, I think about it this way. In real estate, we're all working together, right? It doesn't matter.
yeah, we want
Really?
to close.
Well, it's not only that, it's if they have fulfilled their condition, they send you a waiver, maybe that realtor doesn't actually know the difference between
Yeah.
the forms. So you can just be helpful and say, hey, by the way, the proper form to send is actually the notice of fulfillment. Can you just copy everything you have here, put it on the notice of fulfillment, get it signed and send it?
So that's why there's two different forms. Okay? Ideally, if they've completed, you want the notice of fulfillment, and absolutely let the agent know ahead of time. Yeah, you got an offer, you've got conditions in here. Once the conditions are fulfilled, please send us a notice of fulfillment, not a waiver. So you have the right to request that. Okay. The third way you can remove those conditions is if you're doing an amendment where both parties can sign off on it. Okay, that only usually happens is if they're deleting or inserting something else. Okay, but you still can do it with an amendment, but understand an amendment has to be signed off by both parties, where a notice of fulfillment or waiver does not.
And the bottom acknowledgement can be done by the agent, not necessarily the seller.
The bottom can be done by the agent, that where it says acknowledged, as long as in clause 3 of the agreement of purchase and sale, it states that you have the right to do that.
It's pre-printed, you're saying.
Well, no, it is pre-printed. Clause 3 is pre-printed.
Yeah.
But you either have to put in an email address or a fax number. If that is blank, then nobody besides the owners and buyers can acknowledge these. Okay, so where it says, and that's why if you read that clause 3, it stipulates you as, you know, they're appointing you as the representative to receive notices and acknowledge notices. Okay. So if that's blank, you cannot do it. If that's not your email address or your fax number, you cannot do it. Okay, because they're appointing whoever that person is or that email address is. One thing to understand, if you are doing multiple representation, that clause 3 must be blank. Do not put any information in there. If you do, the only information is the buyer's information or the seller's, and the seller's information. Because under multiple representation, and it's big, bold letters in the middle of that clause. Okay, if it's multiple representation, you cannot receive notices and acknowledge notices. Okay, so that's that, those forms. Form 127. Some people ask about this particular form. This was really used a lot in multiple offer situations. Okay, so in multiple offer situations, this particular form was really used a lot because it's stating, okay, that the buyer is acknowledging, okay, the buyer's acknowledging to the brokerage for the purpose of the address, the seller, the buyer hereby acknowledges with respect to conditions that the buyer will not be including a condition in the buyer's offer for the above described property, will be waiving the condition in the buyer's offer for the above described property that has not been satisfied or achieved, okay? Pertaining to the financing and all of this stuff, okay? The reason this is really in here is to protect us as the realtors. It is given to this, signed off by the buyer, but really understand that this form, agents were using it to show that when their offer was clean with no conditions, they submitted this from the buyer and said to the seller or the seller's agent, look, our offer's firm. And yes, my buyers acknowledged that they had the rights to put in conditions and did not. So it's really where it's trying to strengthen the firm offer, where in reality, this is really, really important as protection for us as realtors, because the biggest one is you went in with a firm offer, then the buyer all of a sudden can't get financing. Who do you think the buyer is going to sue? They're going to turn around and going to say, my agent said that I didn't have to put any financing conditions in, or I didn't have to put any home inspection in. Yet if you got this form signed, it's really tough for them to say that you didn't advise them that they should be putting in or getting legal independent advice, because it states right on here. This is from the buyer's statement. I acknowledge it has been recommended that I obtain independent legal advice prior to signing the offer or waiver. I acknowledge that prior to signing the offer waiver, I understand the factors to consider and risk involved in not including the conditions, waiving the conditions in my offer. I take full responsibility for making the decisions not to include the conditions, to waive the conditions in my offer. I understand that I am committed to take whatever steps are necessary to complete the transaction. I may be liable if the agreement of purchase and sale is not completed. Okay? That is really designed to protect us. Yep, Nancy?
Is it acceptable, like clause 13 on the agreement of purchase and sale talks about inspection, and in the past when I've had people that didn't want the inspection, I've had them just initial right beside that clause?
That's fine, yep. But understand on that clause, then you need to have the seller's initial it as well.
Yeah.
Okay. On this form, nobody but the buyer signed. Okay. The other part is by using this form, they have the statement that states that you recommended that they seek independent legal advice. They have a statement, where if you're just getting them to initial saying that, they're initialing the clause, they're going to go, well, I really didn't know what I was initialing. She just said initial here. So right? So, but this really has a really enforceable statement attached to it. So if we had to go in front of RECO with either the initial beside the clause, or we went in with this form would protect us way more. Okay? Next one is a very similar form, except it's for a seller. Form 128. Pretty well identical wording. And people say, well, what kind of clause would a seller, okay? Let's say a seller, especially when the market was really hot, they were buying firm without selling, without putting a condition on selling their house. This would be a good form to have signed if you're doing that with a seller. So if the seller's buying firm and they've got a house to sell, this would be a good form just to acknowledge that, the seller had the right to put a condition on sale of their property and understand the consequences by not doing so. And then all of a sudden the market crashed, they can't sell their house, and they go to RECO and say, well, my agent told us that no worries, our house would sell. And so they told us we didn't have to put a condition on sale in. And there are cases in front of RECO right now with that. But with this particular form signed by the sellers with the description of that would protect us way more than not having anything. Or just having verbal, okay? And then another form, notice to remove conditions. Form 121. This is one that you'll see sometimes. And it basically just says agreement, the buyer, the seller, agreement of purchase and sale between the buyer and seller dated concerning the property. In accordance with the terms and conditions of the above agreement of purchase and sale, I hereby advise that I have received another offer to purchase the above mentioned property, which is acceptable to me. This is to advise you that you now have a certain amount of time to remove the conditions of whatever you had in the offer. So this form is used if you, for instance, you have a listing, you accept an offer. In that offer, this buyer it's conditional on the buyer being able to sell their house for a certain period of time, and you have an escape clause. You receive another offer that is acceptable, that you've accepted, the seller's accepted, conditional on being released from the previous agreement of purchase and sale. That's where this form comes in. That's the only time this form would come in. Where there's a condition in favor of the buyer, but the seller has the right, and it doesn't have to be conditional on sale. It could be a long due diligence clause. When the seller turns around and goes, I'm not going to wait 90 days while you do that. You want to do your due diligence? I'm still going to offer the property for sale. If I get another offer acceptable to me, I'm going to give you your, and then usually due diligence, it's about 72 hours, not 24. But that's where this would come in. Okay. Any questions on any of this stuff? As a refresher for everybody? Okay. Yeah, I just really, as I say, when activity picks up, calls come into the office from either the agents or from other brokers that are calling me about stuff or consumers. And that's great. Hey, those calls are good because it means activity's picking up. Okay. Anything else? I know we're way over time, but anybody got a hot listing? I got one. Oh, sorry. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Elroy's going to sell my new listing, aren't you, Elroy?
We'll try. No promises, though. We'll see.
All right. So I am literally leaving here, driving up to Thornbury to put a sign on a property that is a cabin, let's call it. It actually is 551 square feet, 1 bedroom detached. has a gas fireplace that heats the place in the living room, has an electric baseboard heater in the bathroom, which is a 3-piece, and in the bedroom, has a crawl space, is literally in downtown Thornbury. You are half a block to the beach, to Bayview Park. The lot's 120 across the front, 62 down one side, 113 down the other side, and 110 across. 550,000 as is. And you can walk to all the restaurants. So if you got anybody, it is going live today.
Go get him, Elroy.
So, and that can go to anybody. I don't care. Elroy is right. I know he's done some stuff up in Wasaga and around that area, so. Okay. And if anybody wants to sit on an open house, take a lawn chair. It's vacant.
Nope.
And it literally is like the trail that goes from Meaford to Collingwood is right out their front door. And so when I say in my description, it says you can walk like along the trail. And it's literally maybe a minute and a half walk down to the waterfront. So great opportunity for somebody. If it's a first-time buyer versus buying a friggin' townhouse with maintenance fees, but it's like 1 bedroom, open concept, 3-piece bath, but great opportunity. All right, anything else? Okay.
I have
get
a
out there.
listing coming up in Palgrave. It's right next to the Oak Ridges Moraine. Stunner home. It's going to be coming up, I think this week. We should be listing it soon. The only reason there was a delay is they removed the hand railings going upstairs to put in new ones, and that got delayed. So now we're just going to wait for that hand railing to be in place, and then we're listing it. And it's saltwater pool, soccer field of a backyard, little basketball court. So it's going to be an awesome home. I'm hoping that Palgrave sells itself, because it seems like that whole area is just a wonderful area. So that's going to be coming up.
Cool, good. Anybody had any recent sales you want to share with us?
I'm getting tons of action on my Trout Creek place.
Good.
And they're putting an offer in on one in Berks Falls, but unfortunately the wife is out of town until the 6th. So when she gets back, we're going to be doing an offer again, conditional on sale of the buyer's property, because that seems to be the trend right now.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, Julia.
I'm getting reasonable number of appointments on my condo down at King and Bathurst, but I wanted to share what happened the other night, because this is something I've had to change on my broker bay. Downtown can sometimes be a challenge, and I guess the person that showed Thursday night didn't lock my lockbox properly, and my lockbox and key disappeared. So I've just rekeyed the unit and put a new lockbox in, and I put a complaint in with the condo board, and they pulled the, well, actually I went to security and I said, should we be calling the police? And they said, no, we'll pull the tape. And yeah, it was somebody that kind of wanders around the neighborhood, and he checks all lockboxes for, to see, like, he went through the whole line, and mine popped open, I guess. So be very careful. And I've got in capital on Broker Bay now, please close the lockbox when you remove the keys, and check that it's been closed after you return them, because these things happen.
Oh, I could absolutely. I was showing a bunch of places in Liberty Village, and I was amazed at how many lock boxes
And you mix up.
that were
Agents
just,
mix up keys.
they were just, and a couple of them, the codes were still, like, they closed them, but they didn't scramble the codes.
100%.
So don't be.
Actually, I'm going to change my Broker Bay and remind them, I use a push button one, but you should always make sure you put that in there in case anything happens, and then you can go back and say, I mean, I'm not gonna accuse the agent of not locking the box. I asked him and he was the last one in, but you know, he's also got a buyer, so do I want to make him mad? Nope. I just paid the $300 for the keys and
I'm just gonna share this with you, it just came to my mind. I've had that issue with friggin' keys disappearing.
Yep.
While we were building this space here. Friggin' contractors would just take off with, and we have fobs, right, for the building. Well, Joe, if anybody knows Joe, our property managed guy and good friend, he said, screw that, Scott. He said, I'm buying air tags. He put air tags on our key, our fob here. And he goes, all right, friggin' key's missing again. Let's find out where it is. It was in St. Catharines in the truck of one of the contractors.
that's a
So Joe
great
called up,
idea. And I'm gonna
right?
go and put an air tag on my keys. That's what I'm gonna do. And you know what happens else is? If agents don't show up for their appointments, that air tag won't have shown that it's moved. So there's proof that they made an appointment and didn't show up because nobody leaves a card anymore. So that's a great idea.
I'm
Good tip.
predicting
go.
AirTag sales are gonna go through the roof right now.
I have 4 right here, so.
I think you should get a logo.
Logoed air tags. Super.
Yeah. Right? So, yeah, so that literally, that just popped into my head as you were describing this. I'm thinking how many times I had to go and get new friggin' fobs for the contractors here. It's amazing once we put the air tag on and we let all the contractors know, please be advised, we now, you know, the keys are being electronically tracked. So,
Buying one right now.
all right.
Air tag holder.
I personally have them everywhere. I have 2 sets of keys. They both have air tag, like personally, I have 2 sets of keys. They both have air tags. There's one in my wallet. I keep one in my car. And all of my devices I track because if anyone has spent more than an hour with me, I lose my stuff constantly.
When we travel, they're in all of our different
Mhm.
suitcases and in my golf bag. Golf
I'll
bags
tell you-
are amazing.
I'll tell you another story from, I was in Liberty Village and we were at a concert. And we got in the car, started driving home, and my AirTag notification went off and somebody stuck, and it said iPod, which is why it was unusual because I knew my iPod was on my desk. And so it went off. So somewhere under my car, there is an air tag of somebody that probably wanted to follow me and steal my car. So
Oh,
yeah, that's how they do it. They usually put it under the front or the back bumper. I still haven't found it. It may have fallen off, but when I saw that I was being tracked, I disconnected it from my car. So yeah, I called my girlfriend who was a retired cop and she said, oh yeah, that's how they do it. They see a nice car, they follow you home middle of the night or 2 days later or a week later, they know where that car is and they come and steal it. So
wow. So you're saying, so is that the way air tags work? Like if it's not even your own air tag, you're.
Yeah, so if there's one around you, it will ask to connect to your device.
Oh,
So if you don't know what the device is, Nadia actually had this happen too when she went away to a wedding in California. They did a car rental and all of their phones went off. AirTag detected, do you want to connect? And they ended up calling the rental car people to be like, is this yours? Because we don't feel safe driving this car, like if it's not yours.
oh,
Mhm.
all right. Well, I know what's gonna happen in downtown. They're gonna see Julia's new keys and go, hey, what's this? You're right. All right. Stocks in air tags just went up.
Everybody invest now.
Because this is publicized.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, nothing else that I can share. I've got, that listing. We got some good activity happening. Consumers are out there. You just got to be talking and communicating with people, okay? Just don't stop. Build up that database, communicate with that database. Business is happening. All right. Hey, sorry we're a little bit longer than today, but I thought it was important to just sort of do a reminder of all the different forms because they are being a lot, they're coming across on my desk. And everybody have a great day and go Jays go.
It was a great meeting, Scott. Thank you.
Great meeting.
All right, everybody. Okay, see everybody later.